Your brain doesn't know the difference between what you tell it and what's actually happening in your external environment. This isn't philosophy, this is neuroscience. Every morning, within the first few minutes of consciousness, your prefrontal cortex is primed for neuroplasticity, and the words you choose will literally rewire your brain's architecture for success or failure. The first 30 minutes after waking represent peak neuroplasticity when your brain is most receptive to new programming through deliberate self-talk. During the transition from sleep to wakefulness, your brain undergoes a remarkable neurochemical transformation that creates an optimal window for cognitive reprogramming. The theta brain waves that dominate REM sleep gradually shift to alpha waves, creating a unique neurological state where your conscious and subconscious minds are simultaneously active. This liminal space between sleep and full consciousness is when your neural networks are most malleable and receptive to new information patterns. Your cortisol levels naturally spike during this morning transition, reaching their peak approximately 30 minutes after awakening. This isn't the stress-induced cortisol that damages cognitive function, but rather an activation hormone that increases alertness and primes neural pathways for learning. When combined with intentional self-talk, this cortisol surge acts as a neuroplasticity catalyst, facilitating the formation and strengthening of new synaptic connections. The hippocampus, your brain's primary learning center, shows heightened activity during this morning window. Memory consolidation processes that began during sleep continue into early waking moments, making this an ideal time to introduce new cognitive patterns and beliefs. The neural pathways you activate through morning self-talk become integrated into your brain's existing knowledge networks more efficiently than at any other time of day. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, often called miracle grow for the brain, reaches elevated levels during morning hours. BDNF promotes the growth of new neurons and strengthens existing neural connections. When you engage in deliberate self-talk during peak BDNF production, you're essentially providing the molecular building blocks for lasting cognitive change while simultaneously directing where that growth occurs. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function and decision-making, exhibits enhanced connectivity with other brain regions during morning awakening. This increased communication between brain areas means that positive self-talk doesn't just influence isolated thought patterns, but creates cascading effects throughout your entire neural network. The statements you make to yourself become integrated across multiple cognitive systems, influencing everything from attention regulation to emotional processing. Your brain's default mode network, active during rest and introspection, remains partially engaged during morning consciousness. This network continues processing and integrating information from your intentional self-talk even after you finish speaking, extending the neuroplasticity benefits throughout your morning routine. The neural pathways established during this critical 30-minute window continue strengthening through background processing, creating lasting structural changes in brain architecture that support sustained behavioral change and enhanced cognitive performance. Your brain doesn't distinguish between external reality and internal narrative. The words you speak to yourself literally rewire neural pathways through measurable changes in brain structure. The human brain processes language through a complex network involving Broca's area, Wernicke's area, and the angular gyrus. But what most people don't understand is that these same regions activate whether you're hearing words from someone else or generating them internally through self-talk. When you speak to yourself, your brain initiates the same neural firing patterns as if someone else were speaking those exact words to you. This phenomenon, known as covert speech processing, means that your internal dialogue carries the same neuroplastic weight as external communication. Neuroimaging studies using fMRI technology reveal that positive self-talk activates the left prefrontal cortex while simultaneously dampening activity in the right prefrontal cortex, the region associated with negative rumination and self-criticism. This shift in hemispheric activation creates measurable changes in neurotransmitter production, increasing dopamine and serotonin while reducing cortisol and inflammatory markers. These neurochemical changes don't just influence mood, They alter the physical structure of synaptic connections. The language processing centers of your brain are intimately connected to the limbic system through the anterior cingulate cortex. When you consistently use empowering language in your self-talk, you're strengthening the neural pathways between rational thought centers and emotional regulation systems. Over time, this creates what neuroscientists call top-down emotional regulation, your ability to consciously influence emotional states through deliberate cognitive input. Mirror neurons, originally discovered in relation to observing others' actions, also fire when you engage in self-directed speech. These neurons create internal simulation experiences, meaning that when you tell yourself, "I am capable of learning anything," your brain activates the same neural networks as if you were actually demonstrating that capability. This internal rehearsal strengthens motor cortex patterns and builds confidence at the cellular level. The reticular activating system, a network of neurons in the brainstem, acts as a filter for incoming sensory information. The language you use in self-talk programs this system to notice information that aligns with your stated beliefs while filtering out contradictory data. When you consistently tell yourself empowering narratives, you're literally programming your brain's attention mechanisms to seek evidence that supports those narratives in your environment. Repetitive language patterns create what neuroscientists call neural groove, deepening the strengthening of specific synaptic pathways through repeated activation. Each time you repeat a positive self-statement, you're increasing the myelination of those neural pathways, making them faster and more efficient. Eventually, these empowering thought patterns become your brain's default processing mode, requiring less conscious effort to maintain. Viewing challenges as cellular-level training activates beneficial stress responses that increase BDNF brain-derived neurotrophic factor and build resilience at the neurological level. The concept of stress inoculation operates on the principle of hormesis, the biological phenomenon where small doses of stress actually strengthen an organism's adaptive capacity. When you consciously reframe challenges as training opportunities, you're activating what researchers call the challenge response rather than the threat response. This distinction isn't merely psychological. It creates dramatically different neurochemical cascades that either enhance or impair cognitive function. During the challenge response, your sympathetic nervous system releases a specific cocktail of hormones including norepinephrine, adrenaline, and DHEA, a dehydroepiandrosterone. This combination increases heart rate and blood pressure while simultaneously enhancing focus and cognitive flexibility. The key difference from chronic stress is the presence of DHEA, which acts as a neurosteroid that promotes brain plasticity and protects against the damaging effects of cortisol. When you tell yourself that difficulties are training your resilience, you're literally triggering the release of this brain protective compound. The prefrontal cortex plays a crucial role in stress reframing through its connections to the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. When you consciously interpret stressors as growth opportunities, the prefrontal cortex sends inhibitory signals to the amygdala, preventing the fear center from hijacking your stress response. This top-down regulation allows you to maintain access to higher-order thinking skills even under pressure, creating what psychologists call stress-related growth. BDNF production increases significantly during controlled stress exposure when combined with positive cognitive reframing. This neurotrophine acts like fertilizer for neural connections, promoting the growth of new dendrites and strengthening existing synapses. The hippocampus, particularly vulnerable to chronic stress damage, actually grows new neurons when exposed to brief, manageable stressors that are cognitively reframed as beneficial. This process, called stress-induced neurogenesis, is the biological foundation of post-traumatic growth. The anterior cingulate cortex, which monitors conflicts and contradictions, becomes more active during stress reframing exercises. This region learns to distinguish between productive stress, eustress, and destructive stress, distress based on your cognitive interpretation. Over time, this neural discrimination becomes automatic, allowing your brain to respond to challenges with curiosity and engagement rather than fear and avoidance. Cellular stress response pathways, including heat shock proteins and antioxidant enzymes, are upregulated when you approach difficulties with a growth mindset. These molecular mechanisms repair cellular damage and strengthen cellular resilience, creating a biological foundation that supports psychological resilience. The phrase, training my resilience at the cellular level, isn't metaphorical. It's an accurate description of the molecular processes activated by constructive stress reframing. Conscious attention direction activates top-down control mechanisms in the parietal cortex and programs the reticular activating system to filter information in alignment with your stated intentions. Attention isn't a passive spotlight that randomly illuminates aspects of your environment. It's an active neurological process controlled by a sophisticated network of brain regions working in precise coordination. The superior parietal lobule acts as the primary attention control center, receiving input from the frontal eye fields and directing the focus of your conscious awareness. When you deliberately state your intention to control your attention, you're activating the dorsal attention network, which includes the intraparietal sulcus and frontal eye fields, creating measurable changes in neural connectivity patterns. The reticular activating system, a dense network of neurons extending from the upper medulla through the pons to the thalamus, serves as your brain's primary information filtering mechanism. This system processes approximately 11 million bits of sensory information per second, but only allows about 40 bits to reach conscious awareness. The criteria for this filtering process aren't random. They're programmed by your conscious intentions and stated priorities. When you declare ownership of your attention, you're literally programming the RAS to prioritize information that supports your goals while filtering out irrelevant distractions. Neurotransmitter systems play crucial roles in attention regulation. Acetylcholine, released from the nucleus basalis, enhances signal-to-noise ratios in cortical processing, making relevant information more salient while suppressing background neural activity. Norepinephrine from the locus coeruleus modulates attention, intensity, and arousal levels. When you consciously direct your attention, you're triggering the coordinated release of these neurochemicals, creating optimal conditions for focused cognitive processing. The anterior cingulate cortex monitors conflicts between competing attention demands and allocates cognitive resources accordingly. This region exhibits increased activity when you practice deliberate attention control, strengthening its capacity to detect and resolve attention conflicts. Over time, this enhanced conflict monitoring ability becomes automatic, allowing you to maintain focus even in highly distracting environments without conscious effort. Brain imaging studies reveal that attention training creates structural changes in white matter tracts connecting attention-related brain regions. The superior longitudinal fasciculus, which connects parietal and frontal attention areas, shows increased myelination and neural density in individuals who practice deliberate attention control. These structural changes represent the physical foundation of improved cognitive control and sustained attention capacity. The default mode network, active during rest and mind wandering, becomes less intrusive when you practice intentional attention direction. Regular attention training strengthens the salience network's ability to switch between focused attention and default mode processing, reducing the cognitive interference that typically occurs when your mind wanders during important tasks. Acknowledging the brain-body connection activates interoceptive awareness through the vagus nerve, improving emotional regulation and decision-making capacity. The vagus nerve represents the longest cranial nerve in your body, extending from the brainstem through the neck, chest, and abdomen, creating a bidirectional superhighway of communication between your brain and virtually every major organ system. This neural pathway carries approximately 80% of its signals from body to brain, meaning your internal bodily states profoundly influence your cognitive processes, emotional regulation, and decision-making capacity. When you consciously acknowledge this mind-body connection, You're activating the parasympathetic nervous system and enhancing your brain's ability to process interoceptive signals. Interoception, your ability to perceive internal bodily sensations, is processed primarily through the insular cortex, particularly the anterior insula. This brain region integrates sensory information from your heart, lungs, digestive system, and other organs with emotional and cognitive processing centers. Research demonstrates that individuals with higher interoceptive accuracy show superior emotional regulation, better decision-making under uncertainty, and increased empathy. The anterior insula connects directly to the anterior cingulate cortex, creating a neural network that translates bodily awareness into conscious emotional understanding. Heart rate variability, the natural variation in time between heartbeats, serves as a direct measure of vagal tone and nervous system balance. When you acknowledge your mind-body connection, you're activating the cardiac branch of the vagus nerve, which increases heart rate variability and promotes what researchers call cardiac coherence. This state optimizes cognitive function by synchronizing neural oscillations across multiple brain regions, creating ideal conditions for creative problem-solving and strategic thinking. The enteric nervous system, often called the second brain, contains over 500 million neurons embedded in the walls of your digestive tract. This neural network communicates with your brain through the vagus nerve, influencing mood, cognition, and stress responses through gut-brain signaling pathways. When you honor the brain-body relationship, you're enhancing this bidirectional communication, allowing gut-based intuitive insights to inform conscious decision-making processes. Breathing patterns directly influence vagal tone through the respiratory sinus arrhythmia, where heart rate naturally increases during inspiration and decreases during expiration. Conscious acknowledgement of breath-body-brain connections activates the dorsal motor nucleus of the vagus nerve, promoting deeper, more efficient breathing patterns that optimize oxygen delivery to the prefrontal cortex while simultaneously activating the relaxation response. Inflammatory markers, including cytokines and stress hormones, are regulated through the vagal anti-inflammatory pathway. When you consciously integrate mind-body awareness, you're activating this neural circuit, which suppresses inflammatory responses and promotes cellular repair mechanisms. This anti-inflammatory effect extends to brain tissue, protecting neural structures from chronic stress damage while supporting optimal cognitive function and neuroplasticity. Affirming your current position as perfect for progress reduces cognitive load from regret and anxiety, freeing mental resources for creative problem-solving while maintaining forward momentum. The human brain's temporal processing system operates through distinct neural networks that handle past, present, and future-oriented thinking. The default mode network, which includes the medial prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate cortex, becomes hyperactive when you're ruminating about past failures or anxiously projecting future catastrophes. This excessive activation creates what neuroscientists call cognitive load, the mental energy consumed by irrelevant processing that could otherwise be allocated to productive thinking. When you affirm that your current position is optimal for taking the next step, you're redirecting neural resources from rumination networks to executive function centers. The anterior cingulate cortex serves as your brain's conflict monitoring system, constantly scanning for discrepancies between your current reality and desired outcomes. When this region detects significant gaps, it triggers stress responses and allocates cognitive resources to worry and planning cycles that often become counterproductive. By accepting your present position as strategically advantageous, you're reducing anterior cingulate activation, allowing this neural region to focus on genuine problem-solving rather than chronic dissatisfaction monitoring. Working memory, controlled primarily by the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, has limited capacity. Approximately 7 pieces of information can be actively maintained simultaneously. When your working memory is occupied with regret about past decisions or anxiety about future outcomes, less cognitive capacity remains available for creative thinking, strategic planning, and innovative problem solving. Present moment acceptance creates what researchers call cognitive flexibility by freeing working memory resources for novel solution generation. The brain's prediction system, centered in the prefrontal cortex, constantly generates models of future scenarios based on current inputs. When you're psychologically anchored in present moment acceptance, these predictive models become more accurate and optimistic because they're based on realistic assessments rather than fear-distorted projections. This improved prediction accuracy enhances decision-making quality and reduces the cognitive energy wasted on preparing for unlikely negative outcomes. Neurotransmitter balance shifts dramatically when you practice present moment optimization. Chronic regret and future anxiety trigger excessive cortisol and norepinephrine release, which impair hippocampal memory formation and prefrontal cortex function. Present moment acceptance activates gamma aminobutyric acid, GABA pathways, creating a neurochemical state that supports calm alertness and cognitive clarity. This GABA activation allows dopamine and acetylcholine systems to function optimally, enhancing motivation and learning capacity.